Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Until now we've been discussing Shehiyah, the prohibition of maintaining food on a flame by putting a pot before Shabbos. We have 2 different shitos. The shita of the Rabbanon, that unless the pot on the flame has grufa or ketuma, that means that either the coals were taken out or that was covered with ashes, it cannot be maintained on the fire, even if it was placed before Shabbos. Chananya, however, is of the opinion that it does not require grufa or ketuma. If you put it there before Shabbos, it's okay. Now, if a person puts a pot, even if it's fully cooked, on Shabbos, that is called nesina lechatchila, and therefore it appears as if a person is coming to cook his pot, and therefore that's also midirabban according to everybody. Nonetheless, the machlokes between the Chachamim and Chananya is a running machlokes in the Tanoim, in the Amorim, and even in the Poskim. The Gemara now turns its focus to Chazara. According to Chananya, including the Chachamim, they agree, of course, to the Chachamim that when it comes to Chazara, you do need grufa or ketuma. Says the Gemara, under what circumstances is Chazara necessary? Beis Hillel oimrim af machzirin. A quote from our Mishnah that Beis Hillel says that when you return a pot that was already placed on the stove before Shabbos, again, assuming it was already Kemaichel ben Drasai, even according to Chananya, and now you want to take it off on Shabbos and return it. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yasheshis ledivrei ha'oimer machzirin. According to those who say machzirin, afilu b'Shabbos, it means even on Shabbos day itself. This comes to say that not only at night, it's clear that when you take off the pot, you're going to be returning it for the next day. But even if you then take off the pot during the day, then also if those that has the clear appearance that you're going to then return it, nonetheless, that's sufficient to take it off even during the day. And even Rabbi Yoshaya is of the opinion that when a person does chazara and takes off that pot, that doesn't have to have the appearance that he's going to then put it back on Shabbos. That means he can even take it off during the day to then be put back on later on. One time we were standing before Rabbi Chia Rabba. Helanu loikumkum shel chamin b'diyoto hatachtoin l'diyoto halyoino, and we took a copper kettle and we brought it from the lower floor to the higher floor. Umazganu loy esakois, and we then mixed the hot water from the kumkum to his kois shel yayin. V'hichziranu l'makoimoy, and returned it to its place. So even though over here it's not clear that he did this at night or during the day, but the principle exists still, that even though when he took it off and took it from the lower floor, it wasn't apparent that he was going to return it because he took then the pot, the kettle, to the above floor. So even though when he took it off, it wasn't apparent that he was going to return it, we see over here that it's mutter to be machzir such a kettle, such a pot. Amar Rabbi Zriko, Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Tadai. Lo shanu ella she'oidon biyodoi. This that we're saying is mutter to be machzir a pot on Shabbos. That's only so long as it's still in his hands, says Rabbi Todai. Aval hinichan al gabe karka osir. But if you were to place it on the ground, then it would be osir, because then it would be appearing as if he's now making a new cooking and cooking on Shabbos. So therefore he's mevatel the shehiyah from before if he puts it down on the karka. Om Rabbi Abmi, Rabbi Tradoi, Da'ovad, Legarmehu Da'ovad. That which Rabbi Tradoi did, he did it on his own, meaning to say, that's his own opinion. He's a das yochid in this manner. Elohochi Am Rabbi Chia, Am Rabbi Yochanan, but this is what Rabbi Chia said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Afilu hanicha al gabe karka mutter. Even if you place it down on the ground, you can still go ahead and return that pot onto the flame. Says the Gemara, to machloikis amoroim. What are the conditions one has to have in order to then do chazor and return a pot back to the flame? Pligo bo Rabbi Dimi, Rab Shmuel, Bar Yehuda, v'trovayu mishem de Rabbi Elozar, Amri. There's a machlokis between Rav Dimi and Rav Shmuel, Bar Yehuda, and they both said in the name of Rabbi Elozar the following: Chad Omar Oidon Biyadoi Mutter Al Gabe Karka Oser. One said if it's still in his hands, even if he then put it down, if it's in his hands, it's mutter. However, if he put it down on the ground, then it will be oser. V'chad Omar Hinichan Al Gabe Karka Nami Mutter. The other one says even if he puts it down on the ground, it will still be mutter. Now the Gemara has two different lishonos to explain the first of the opinions that we mentioned now. The opinion that says oidan biyodoi mutter al gabe karka oser. Says the Gemara, Omar of Chizkiya mishmei da Abaye. The first lashon is Chizkiya name of Abaye as follows: Ha da amars da amris oidan biyodoi mutter. That what you said in your statement, if it's still in his hands, it's mutter. He explains as follows: Lo yamar an el shedaita lahachzir. That's only talking about when he has intention to return it. Then do we say it's mutter? Aval ein daita lahachzir oser. However, even if it's still in his hands and he doesn't have intention to return it, then it's going to be oser. Michlal, it follows. The al gabe karko afal pisha daita lahachzir oser. It follows, though, however, that the second statement that he made that said al gabe karko is going to be oser. That means to say that whether he had intention or not, it still will be osir so long as he puts it on the ground. Says the Gemara, Ike da Amre. There's another lush, another version of what we just said. Omar Chizkiya b'shmei da Abaye. Again, we're going on that statement that we just said before of oidam biyoda mutter al gabe karka osir. There's two parts of the statement. If it's still in his hands, it's mutter. If he puts them down on the ground, it's osir. According to this version, as follows: Ho da amris al gabe karko osir. That which you said in the second half of your statement, that if you put it down on the ground, it'll be osir. Lo yamron elashein daita lahachzir. That's only because he doesn't have das to return it. That's why it's osir when he puts it on the ground. Aval daita lahachzir mutter. But if he has das to return it, even if he puts it on the ground, it'll be mutter. Michlal. It follows that the first part of the statement, sheba oidin beyodoi. That so long as it's in his hands, even if he does not have das to return it, it will be mutter. Says the Gemara the following question: Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyahu, what about when it's not clearly on the ground, or it's not clearly in his hands? How do we don that case? Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyahu, tlon b'makil mau. If he hangs it on a peg, what's the din? Here it's not in his hands, it's also not on the ground. If he places on a mita, on a bed, what's the din? It's not on the ground, but it's also not in his hands. Says the Gemara, boy Rav Ashi, pina mimecham lamecham mahu. If he places it from one mecham, let's say one pot to another pot, what's the din when he moves that tavshil? Says the Gemara, teku, it's unresolved. These three questions. The Gemara now brings the Mishnah similar to the previous Mishnah, but the previous Mishnah was discussing a kira. A kira is a type of stove which is made in a rectangular shape, and it has two different places to place a pot on, two different areas for two different pots. Made out of normally kli cheres, a ceramic. Says the Mishnah, now we're talking about a tanur. A tanur is different than a kira. A tanur has its walls that are then going upwards and begins going inwards. In other words, it becomes more narrow as it gets higher, and therefore it retains heat in a much greater way. So a tanur, shehisiku bekash ubegava, which is ignited, is fueled with kash ugavava, with straw or thin pieces of wood. Lo yitain bein mitoichoi bein me'al gabov. You cannot place a pot on the tanur or inside of the tanur because of its great heat, even though it's only being fueled by kash and gabavo. Kupach is similar to a kira, but it only has one place where you can put a pot, and instead of being a rectangle, it's square-shaped. And therefore it also retains more heat than a kira, but less heat than a tanur. Says the Mishnah, Shehi sikua bekash ubegava. This kupach that is fueled by kash ubegava, hareze kikirayim. It has the din of kirayim, which does not require gruf or ketuma. You can do shehiyah and place the pot on the kupach before Shabbos, even without any gruf or ketuma on an open flame. Again, assuming that it's been cooked, at least partially. Begabas uve'etzim, begefes uve'etzim rather, harehu ketanur. If, however, it's being fueled with gefes, we said is the psoiles. After you take out the oil, you press the olives and take out the oil of the olives and the sesames, and you use that for your fuel, or you use big pieces of wood. Then it has a din of harehu ketanur, has a din of a tanur, in which case it will not be permissible to then do shehiyah on that. Now we explained the Mishnah according to the Chachamim of Chananya, but the same way that we explained the Mishnah beforehand, Gabe Kira, can be explained here as well, that Chananya would say when it comes to shehiyah, maintaining a pot that you placed on the tanur in this case, or the kupach before Shabbos would be permissible even without gruf or ketuma, whereas the subject of our Mishnah is regarding chazara, returning a pot to the tanur or the kupach. Says the Gemara, tanur shehisikuha. That which we said in the reish of our Mishnah of tanur shehisikuha, sov Rav Yosef lemeimar, toichoy mamish, al gabav mamish. That which it said in the Mishnah, that it's betoichoy or gabav, is going to be osir, which is speaking about, that's specifically toichoy and gabav. Aval lismoich shaper daim. But if you would put the pot next to the tanur, then it would be different, it would be permissible. Eisvei Abaye asked the following: Kupach shehisiku bekash ubegavavo. A kupach that was fueled by kash ugavavo, harehu kikirayim. The Mishnah says it's like kirayim. Begefes ve'etzim, harehu kitanur ve'oser. Now Abaye makes a diuk. Ha kikira. If it would be like, the kupach would be like a kira that it was fueled with eitzim and gefes, shari, then it would be mutter, meaning in the same way that the kira was placed. And the Gemara explains, it's b'mayaskinan. Where exactly was this kupach placed? Ilema al gaba, if you were talking about on top, that the pot was on top of the kupach. Uvemai, what are we discussing? Ilema b'she'eno garuv v'katum. If you can tell me it was without gufa and ketuma, then ele kira ki eina grufa ketuma al gab mishori. If it was a kira, we know without grufa and ketuma would not be permissible, as we explained in the previous Mishnah. Elo lav lismoch, rather must be talking about lismoch. V'ktani harehu ketaner v'osi, and still the kupach is compared to a tanur, it's saying it's osir. So you see that even if it's samuch, even if the pot is placed next to the kupach, it has the din of a tanur and it'll be osir. Omarav Ade bar Avo, Hocha bekupach goruf v'kotum, v'tanur gufa ketuma askinon. Hahiyu ketanur. Comes along Rav Ade bar Ava, and he says you have no proof that we're discussing a diuk that if it's samuch, it would be osir. Says Rav Ade bar Ava, because over here we're discussing a kupach that was yes goruf or kotum, and the tanur was yes goruf or kotum, and therefore it has the din of a tanur. Even though it was taken out the coals or the ashes were put onto the coals to diminish the heat. Al gabav osir, still it would be so hot, the tanur is so hot even after gar for katum, it would be osir. So to the kupaf is compared to that. Even if it's going to then taking out the grufa and ketuma would be osir. Di kira, ki grufa and ketuma shapir dam, because if it was compared to a kira, grufa and ketuma would be mutter. So you have no proof that samuch is indeed osir. Maybe samuch would be mutter. It's only if it was on top that would be osir, just like the diuk that we made now, explaining the comparison between the kupach and the tanur. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kavose de Abaye, we have a brisa like Abaye that samuch is indeed osir to put a pot next to the kupach. As follows: Tanur shehisikua bekash ubegavava ein soimchin loy. A tanur, even though it was fueled by just kash and gava, you cannot put the pot next to the tanur because it's so powerfully strong in its heat, even after taking out the kash and the gava. You'll say, what's the chashash? Hare, we're only concerned about shema yechate. But even after taking out, let's say, even after igniting the kash and the gava, which doesn't produce coals, and therefore you might think there's not a problem with shema yechate, but there's always a little bit of burning of the straw and the small pieces of wood, whereby still would be a chashash, a shema yechate, because that little bit is enough to produce a lot of heat in a tanur. Ve'in tzarich lo'ima al gabav, certainly. Then, if it's osir soymech, then the Brisa says it's certainly osir if you put the pot on top. And also you don't need to say you're putting it inside, because that certainly is also going to be osir. And certainly you don't have to say when it's fueled by geves ve'etzim, because geves ve'etzim, even though they produce coals, and you're going to then have the coals, you might then be mechate. And we added before, even if you're going to take out, let's say, the coals, or you're going to then put ashes on it, still that little bit of heat doesn't allow you to then be masiach das, because the tanur is so hot that you might come to then be mechate, because we will see a benefit for cooking whatever tafshil you still want to cook. Kupach, the Brisa continues, in regards to our inyan of kupach, shesikua begashu begavava soimchin loy. A kupa, here it says that a kupa that is going to be fueled by kasha gava, you could be soimchin loy. And here the Gra puts in noisnin al gabav, and you can put it on top. Begefes uve'etzim, however, it's fueled with gefes uve'etzim, ein soimchin loy. Here it says the answer to our question before can be soimech, a kupa next to a kupach with gefes and eitzim, and here it says befeirush like Abaye, ein soimchin loy. You cannot put the pot beside the kupach if it's fueled with gefes or eitzim. Omalei Rav Acha b'rei Rav Rav Ashi, Hai kupach hechidami. What is the situation? What is the inyan of a kupach? Ike kira dami. If it's compared to a kira, then afilu begefes ve'etim nami. Then even gefes ve'etim should be mutter, and you can go ahead and then take out by doing grufa or putting ashes ketuma. Ike tanur dami. If it's like a tanur, compared to a tanur, then afilu kikashu gavo nami loy. Then it shouldn't be permissible kashu gavo. So why does the Mishnah say that has a din of a kira in regards to gefes ve'eitzim, and has a din of a tanur when it comes to kashu gavo? Omarlei nafish hevlei mit the kira. It has more heat than a kira. V'zuta hevla mit tanur, but less heat than a tanur. As we explained before, because a kira is rectangular, which has space for two different pots, so it's bigger, whereas the kupach is smaller, it's square shaped, and it only has enough room for one pot, whereby it retains more heat. It also has less heat, however, than a tanur, because the walls of the tanur become more narrowed as it gets higher, and therefore retains much more heat than the kupach. Ask the Gemara, hechi dami kupach, vehechi dami kira. What exactly is the kupach and what exactly is the kira? Explains the Gemara, There's enough room to place one pot on it. Kira makom shefisas shtei kideros, whereas a kira has enough room to place two different pots. Omar Abai v'tem Rabbi Yirmiyahu af anon nami tanino. We also taught the following: Kira shenechleka la'orcha. If let's say you have a kira, which is this rectangular type of stove, which can contain two different pots, as we just said, if it was split in the orcha, then it's tohara, because over here it means it's split in a way that it's going to break right in between the two places where we can put the pots, two openings, and therefore it's not going to be mekabel tum anymore, because no longer to be a valid kli. However, l'rachva tmeya. But if it was split in the middle, in the rachva, between the two places where you put the pots, then it's a valid kli, because it would be then like a kupach. You would have basically a square with one place for a stove, for a pot. Kupach, however, bein la'orcha, bein la'rochva tahor. Whereas a kupach, if it was split in either direction, it would be tahor, because it would ruin the place where you're going to then put the potential pot in. The hole, the space, is going to be split, and therefore it's not going to be a valid kli, whereby it's not going to be makabel tuma.